The aliens blocked Earth's sun, then humanity activated something behind the moon. It began on a quiet Tuesday morning in March. Dr. Elena Voss was standing on the roof of the Geneva Observatory, drinking her second cup of coffee, when the sky did something it had never done before. The sun did not set. It simply went dark, as if someone had reached up and switched it off. At first, people thought it was an eclipse. Phones lit up across the world with the same question: is this normal? But eclipses did not last for hours. Eclipses did not make the birds fall silent, and the streets fill with a gray, cold light that felt wrong, in a way no one could explain. Elena watched the temperature drop on her weather app, 5 degrees in 10 minutes, and she knew, somehow, that this was not a trick of nature. She ran down 4 flights of stairs to the control room, where a dozen scientists were already shouting over each other. The main screen showed a satellite image of the sun, but something was wrong with it. A shape had appeared between the Earth and the star, a shape too perfect and too dark to be a planet or an asteroid. "It's not natural," said Dr. Andres Kaplan, the observatory's lead astronomer, his voice shaking. "Look at the edges, straight lines. That is not how celestial bodies work." Elena leaned closer to the screen. The object was massive, larger than any planet, and it was positioned exactly between the Earth and the sun, blotting out the light like a hand covering a candle. Around the world, similar images were flooding into every space agency, every university, every government office. NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, and the Chinese National Space Administration all confirmed the same terrifying fact within the hour. Something enormous had appeared in the space between Earth and the sun, and it was blocking most of the light. By nightfall, if you could still call it that, the temperature had dropped across the entire planet. Crops in Kansas wilted under skies that stayed gray, even at noon. In Mumbai, people gathered in the streets, looking up in fear and confusion. In Tokyo, the stock market crashed within hours, as panic spread faster than any government could control it. General Marcus Reyes of the United States Space Force was called into an emergency session at the Pentagon before the sun, or what was left of it, had even fully vanished. He was a tall man, with gray at his temples, and a calm voice that had steadied many rooms before this one. But even he felt his hands tighten into fists as the briefing began. "We have confirmed it is not a natural phenomenon," said the briefing officer, a young analyst named Captain Sarah Chen. "Radar and optical tracking from 6 different countries agree. The object is roughly the size of Jupiter, positioned at what would be the L1 Lagrange point, but it did not arrive gradually. It simply appeared 3 hours ago. No warning, no gradual approach, nothing." "Could it be a weapon?" Marcus asked. "We don't know yet," Sarah said. "But sir, there's something else. We're picking up smaller objects breaking away from the main structure. Thousands of them. They're moving toward Earth." The room went silent. On the screen, the radar plots showed a swarm of small dots peeling away from the massive shadow and beginning a slow, deliberate journey toward the blue planet below. 3 days later, the first ships entered Earth's orbit. They did not attack. They did not announce themselves with grand speeches or displays of power. They simply arrived. Dozens of dark, angular vessels taking positions above major cities. And they waited. The world's militaries scrambled fighters and readied missile defenses. But the alien ships made no aggressive moves. They only watched, silent and still, like predators studying prey, before deciding how to strike. It was Elena who received the first real answer, though she did not expect it to come to her. She was still at the observatory, exhausted and unable to sleep, when her computer screen flickered and displayed a message she had not typed. The words appeared letter by letter, as if someone unseen was typing them from a great distance. "We are the Karn Dominion. Your star has been claimed. Your species will serve, or your species will end. You have 30 of your days to decide." Elena stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She called Andres over, and together they watched as the same message appeared on every screen, connected to the internet across the entire planet, in every language, at the exact same moment. It was not a hoax. It was not a hack by some other nation. It was real, and it was happening to everyone at once. Within hours, world leaders were holding a joint emergency broadcast, something that had never happened before in human history. The President of the United States, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and leaders from every major nation stood together, or at least appeared together, through secure video links, to address a planet gripped by fear. "We do not know who these beings are," the Secretary General said, her voice steady, despite the exhaustion clear on her face. "We do not know what they want, beyond what they have told us. But we do know this. Humanity has faced dark times before, and we have always found a way through. We will not simply give up our freedom without understanding what we are truly facing." Not everyone agreed with her tone of defiance. Panic spread through cities as people stockpiled food, fought over fuel, and fled to whatever shelter they believed might protect them from an enemy no one understood. Riots broke out in a dozen major cities. Governments struggled to keep basic services running as the cold deepened, and daylight remained a dim, gray memory of what it used to be. General Reyes was given command of a new task force, one built from the fastest assembly of military minds in human history. Officers from Russia, China, the United States, India, and a dozen other nations, who had spent decades as rivals, now sat around the same table, forced together by a threat that made their old conflicts seem small and pointless. "Whatever they are," Marcus said during the first joint meeting, "they didn't come here to talk. They came here to take something. Our job is to figure out what, and figure out how to stop them from getting it." Scientists across the world worked without sleep, trying to understand the alien technology. The Karn ships, when finally scanned properly by military satellites, showed technology far beyond anything humanity had built. Their engines defied known physics. Their hulls seemed to shift and bend light around them, making precise tracking difficult even at close range. Elena, now pulled into a special research division working directly with the United Nations Crisis Committee, focused on something different. She was obsessed with the giant structure blocking the sun. If it was truly the size of Jupiter, the amount of energy and material needed to build such a thing was almost impossible to imagine. No civilization, however advanced, could construct something like that quickly, which meant one of two things. Either the Karn had been building it for a very long time before revealing themselves, or they had brought it with them, already built, from somewhere else. "If they can move something that large through space," she told her colleagues during a briefing, "then whatever engine or method they use to bring the sunblock here is something we desperately need to understand. That's not just a weapon. That's a message. They want us to know that resistance is pointless." 10 days into the crisis, message drones descended toward major capital cities, delivering more information from the Karn Dominion. They called it a processing schedule. Human labor and resources would be organized under Karn oversight. Cities would be designated as either productive or unnecessary. The message made clear, in cold and simple language, exactly what would happen to unnecessary populations. That was the moment the world stopped debating whether to resist. Every remaining disagreement between nations fell away, at least on the surface, as humanity began preparing for a war it had no idea how to win. It was during a late-night session, reviewing decades-old satellite data from lunar missions, that Elena noticed something strange. Buried in old, unprocessed data from a 1970s lunar orbiter, there was a magnetic anomaly on the far side of the moon, a spot that had always been dismissed as sensor error. But now, cross-referencing it with new readings, taken just days after the Karn arrival, she saw something that made her blood run cold, and her heart race with sudden hope. The anomaly was active. It had not been active before. Something on the far side of the moon, hidden from Earth's view for its entire recorded history, had begun to respond to the presence of the Karn ships. She brought the data to General Reyes personally, driving through checkpoints and roadblocks in the freezing gray daylight to reach the emergency command center beneath the Pentagon. "General, I need you to see this," she said, spreading printouts across the table. "There's something on the far side of the moon. It's been dormant for as long as we've had satellites to detect it, but 3 days ago, right after the Karn arrived, it started producing energy readings. Small at first, but growing every day." Marcus studied the data with narrowed eyes. "You're telling me there might be something up there, something old, and it's waking up." "I'm telling you," Elena said, "that we are not the first ones the Karn Dominion has ever tried to conquer. And whoever came before us might have left something behind, just in case." Marcus looked at the printouts for a long moment, then at Elena. Outside, the gray sky pressed down on a city living in fear, its people wondering if this was the beginning of the end. But in that room, For the first time since the sun went dark, there was a flicker of something other than despair. "Get me everything you have," Marcus said, "and get me a way to reach that thing before the Karn figure out it's there." Within the hour, a small and secret coalition was formed, made up of scientists, engineers, and soldiers from a dozen nations, all sworn to the same impossible mission: reach the far side of the moon, find whatever was waking up there, and discover if it could be the key to saving humanity from a war it had no chance of winning on its own. Elena stood at the window of the command center that night, looking up at the pale outline of the moon, barely visible through the dim gray sky. Somewhere up there, in the darkness humanity had never been able to see, something ancient was stirring. She did not know if it would be humanity's salvation or its final undoing, but for the first time in 10 days, she allowed herself to hope that the story was not over yet. 2 weeks after the sun went dark, the world had settled into a strange and terrible rhythm. Cities ran on emergency power. Farms failed under skies that never brightened. Food convoys were guarded by soldiers because desperate people had started raiding trucks in broad daylight, though daylight now looked more like a permanent dusk. The Karn ships hung above every major capital, silent and patient, waiting for the 30-day deadline to pass. General Marcus Reyes had not slept more than 4 hours a night since the crisis began. He moved between the Pentagon's underground command center and the newly formed International Defense Council, a body made up of officers and officials from every major nation on Earth. It was strange to see old enemies working side by side, but fear of extinction had a way of erasing old grudges, at least for now. Dr. Elena Voss had barely left the lab in 10 days. She lived on coffee, protein bars, and the growing certainty that the anomaly on the far side of the moon was the only real hope humanity had. Her team had grown from 3 people to nearly 40, pulled from universities and space agencies across the globe, all working around the clock to understand the signal. "It's not random noise," said Dr. Priya Nair, a signals expert from the Indian Space Research Organization, pointing at a wall of scrolling data. "There's a pattern. It repeats every 11 hours, and the strength keeps increasing. Whatever is generating this, it's charging up, like a battery." "Or waking up," Elena said quietly. The team had also discovered something else, something that made the mystery even stranger. The magnetic signature buried in decades-old lunar data was not simply old. Careful analysis of trace isotopes recovered from Apollo-era rock samples, sitting untouched in storage for 50 years, showed material that did not match anything found naturally on the moon or Earth. It was metal, but metal unlike any known alloy, arranged in patterns too precise to be accidental. "Someone built something up there," Elena told General Reyes during a late-night briefing. "A long, long time ago, before humans ever left Earth. Maybe even before humans existed at all." Marcus rubbed his tired eyes. "And you think it's connected to the Karn?" "I think it might be connected to whoever the Karn conquered before us," Elena said. "Think about it. A structure that powerful, hidden on the far side of the moon, where we could never see it from Earth, activating the moment hostile alien ships arrive in our solar system. That's not a coincidence. That's a trigger." The International Defense Council debated for 2 full days about whether to attempt a mission to the moon. Some argued it was too risky, that any spacecraft launched would be detected and destroyed by the Karn before it even left orbit. Others argued that doing nothing guaranteed humanity's defeat anyway, so the risk was worth taking. It was General Reyes who made the final case, standing before the assembled council with the weight of the entire planet's future resting on his shoulders. "We have less than 3 weeks before the Karn deadline," he said. "We have no weapon that can touch their ships. We have no way to negotiate from a position of strength. What we have is a 50-year-old mystery on the far side of the moon that just woke up the moment our enemies arrived. I don't know what's up there. Nobody does, but I know that doing nothing means we walk into slavery or extinction with our eyes open. I say we take the chance." The vote was not unanimous, but it was enough. The mission was approved, and it was given a name, meant to inspire hope in a world that desperately needed it: Operation Lighthouse. Assembling the mission was its own nightmare. Every spacefaring nation on Earth had lost access to their normal launch capabilities, either because the Karn ships were monitoring major spaceports, or because global supply chains had collapsed under the weight of panic and cold. But humanity had one advantage the Karn perhaps did not expect. decades of secret military space programs, hidden away in mountain bunkers and desert facilities, built during a Cold War that had never fully ended in the shadows. The Americans had a stealth-capable spaceplane, built in secret at a facility in Nevada, originally designed to slip past enemy satellites undetected. The Chinese had a similar program, a compact lunar lander built for a secret mission that had been canceled years earlier due to budget concerns. Working together for the first time, engineers from both programs combined their technology, creating a small, difficult but stealthy way to reach the moon without immediately alerting the Karn fleet. Elena was chosen to go, not because she was a trained astronaut, but because she understood the signal data better than anyone alive. She spent 2 frantic weeks in emergency training, learning to survive in a spacesuit, to move in zero gravity, to operate emergency systems if something went wrong. She was terrified, but she did not hesitate. This was, she believed, the only chance her species had. She was joined by 2 others, Captain James Okafor, a Nigerian Air Force pilot with experience flying experimental aircraft, chosen to command the small spacecraft, and Dr. Wei Lin, a Chinese materials scientist who had helped design the lunar lander and who insisted on going himself to make sure his equipment worked as intended. "If we die up there," Wei Lin said during final preparations, only half joking, "at least we'll die knowing what killed us." The launch took place at midnight, from a hidden runway in the Nevada desert, timed carefully to avoid the orbital paths of the nearest Karn ships. The spaceplane climbed into the dark sky, its engines silent compared to older rocket designs, using a hybrid system that produced almost no heat signature. Elena watched through a small window as the Earth fell away beneath her, the lights of cities dimmer than she remembered from childhood photos of the planet from space, the gray shroud of the Karn's sun-blocking structure visible even from orbit, as a strange, dark ring around where the sun should have been. The 3-day journey to the moon was tense. Twice, sensors detected Karn patrol ships passing within a few thousand kilometers, and each time the small crew held their breath, engines powered down, drifting silently until the danger passed. James proved himself a skilled pilot, guiding the craft through gaps in Karn patrol patterns that Elena's team had mapped out from weeks of careful observation. As they approached the moon, Elena's instruments began picking up the signal directly for the first time, no longer filtered through Earth-based receivers but raw and immediate. It was stronger than anyone had predicted, a rhythmic pulse of energy coming from a location on the far side of the moon that had never been closely explored by any human mission, hidden in a deep crater near the lunar South Pole. "We're getting close," Elena said, her voice tight with a mixture of excitement and fear. "Whatever this is, it knows we're coming." The signal just changed pattern. The lander separated from the main spacecraft and began its descent toward the far side of the moon, the side that no human eye had ever seen directly from the surface, since it always faced away from Earth. As they descended, the crater came into view, and what they saw made all 3 of them fall silent. Rising from the crater floor was a structure unlike anything built by human hands, a series of towering, angular spires, arranged in a pattern that seemed almost like a flower, dark metal gleaming faintly under the light of distant stars. Around the base of the structure, faint blue lines of light pulsed in the same rhythm Elena had been tracking for weeks, growing brighter as the lander approached. "That's not a machine," Wei Lin whispered, staring through the viewport. "That's a monument. Someone built that to be found." James guided the lander down carefully, choosing a flat area a few hundred meters from the base of the structure. As the engines cut off and the lander settled onto the gray lunar dust, all 3 of them sat in stunned silence for a long moment, staring at the alien construction rising before them. "Command, this is Lighthouse 1, Elena said into her radio, her voice trembling slightly. "We have landed. We can confirm visual contact with the structure. It's enormous, and it's definitely not natural." Back on Earth, in the underground command center, General Reyes listened to her transmission with his heart pounding. Around him, dozens of officials from a dozen nations leaned toward speakers, waiting for more information from 380,000 kilometers away. "Lighthouse 1, this is command," Marcus said. "You are cleared to proceed with caution. Whatever that thing is, we need to know if it can help us." "The Karn's deadline is in 17 days. Elena took a deep breath, checked the seals on her spacesuit, and looked at her two companions. Ready? James nodded. Wei Lin managed a tight smile. Let's go find out who built humanity's insurance policy. The three of them stepped out of the lander and onto the surface of the far side of the moon, the ancient structure looming before them, its blue lights pulsing steadily brighter with every step they took toward it, as if it had been waiting, patiently, for someone to finally come home. The walk across the crater floor felt endless. The low gravity made each step a strange, bouncing motion, and the silence of the moon pressed in around them, broken only by the sound of their own breathing inside their helmets. As they drew closer, the true scale of the structure became clear. It rose at least 200 meters into the black lunar sky, its spires arranged around a central chamber, whose entrance had begun to glow with a soft, welcoming light. There's a door, James said, his voice tight. Or something like one. Elena's instruments were screaming with data now, energy readings climbing steadily as they approached. She glanced at Wei Lin, who was staring at the structure with a mixture of scientific fascination and simple human awe. Command, Elena said. We're approaching what looks like an entrance. Requesting permission to proceed inside. There was a pause, filled with the crackle of distant static, before Marcus's voice came through, steady despite the enormous weight of the decision. Lighthouse 1, the decision is yours. You're the one standing there. Do what you think is right. Elena looked at the glowing entrance, then back at her two companions, then finally up at the dark, star-filled sky, where somewhere, invisible now behind the moon's curve, an enemy fleet waited to finish what it had started. She thought of Earth, cold and gray and frightened, of billions of people waiting for some sign of hope. Let's go find out what humanity's ancestors left us, she said, and stepped through the light. The light inside the entrance was warm, unlike anything Elena expected from a structure that had sat cold and dormant on the moon for who knew how many thousands of years. As she stepped through with James and Wei Lin close behind her, the darkness of the lunar surface gave way to a wide, glowing corridor, its walls lined with the same soft blue light that had guided them from the crater floor. Command, are you still reading us? James asked, his voice echoing strangely inside his helmet. There was static, then silence. The thick walls of the structure had cut off their communication with Earth entirely. The three of them exchanged a look. They were now completely alone, deeper into the unknown than any human had ever gone. We knew this might happen, Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady. Let's keep moving. We came here for answers. The corridor sloped gently downward, deeper into the structure, and as they walked, the walls began to change. Elena noticed strange symbols carved into the metal, arranged in careful rows, unlike any language she recognized, yet somehow the symbols felt oddly familiar, as if her mind was trying to grasp something just beyond understanding. Wei Lin, are you getting anything on your scanner? Elena asked. Wei Lin, who had been quietly examining the walls with a handheld device, nodded slowly. The material composition is strange. It's metal, but it responds to our presence. Watch this. He reached out and touched one of the glowing lines on the wall. Instantly, the light beneath his fingers brightened, and a low hum rippled through the entire corridor, as if the structure itself had taken a breath. They continued deeper, the corridor eventually opening into a massive circular chamber, so large that its ceiling disappeared into darkness far above them. In the center of the chamber stood a tall pillar of dark crystal, pulsing with the same blue light that had led them here, and around its base, dozens of smaller structures stood in a circle, each one shaped like a curved seat or platform. This looks like some kind of control room, James said, his voice hushed with awe. As they stepped closer to the central pillar, something remarkable happened. The light around them shifted, and suddenly, the empty air above the platforms filled with images, ghostly and translucent, showing scenes that made all three of them freeze in place. They saw stars. They saw planets. They saw, unmistakably, creatures that looked remarkably similar to humans, tall and thin but with 2 arms, 2 legs, and eyes set in a face not so different from their own, working together to build something enormous among the stars. Are those people? Wei Lin whispered. Not exactly, Elena said, staring at the images with wide eyes. But close, very close. The images shifted again, showing the same ancient beings, fleeing from something dark and terrible, ships burning in the black of space, entire worlds consumed by fire. Then, finally, the images showed a small group of survivors, traveling to a young blue planet, planting the seeds of a civilization, meant to survive long after their own had fallen. The final image, before the light faded, showed this very moon, and a structure being built in secret, hidden from the eyes of the young world below. None of them spoke for a long moment. Finally, Elena found her voice. They didn't just leave a message, they left us a legacy. Whoever they were, they seeded life on Earth, or protected it, and they left this place as a failsafe. A last resort, in case something like the Karn ever came for us. A new voice suddenly filled the chamber, not spoken aloud but somehow understood directly in their minds, calm and ancient, neither male nor female, but steady and clear. You have found what was left for you. I am the Keeper, the last remaining consciousness of those who came before. I was built to wait, and I have waited a very long time. The three humans stood frozen, staring at the pillar of light as the voice continued. Long ago my creators were conquered by the same enemy, now above your world. The Karn Dominion has done this many times, to many worlds, across countless years. My creators could not stop them, but before their end, they found your planet, still young, still full of possibility. They could not save themselves, but they could give your kind a chance. How? Elena asked aloud, though she was not sure if the Keeper could hear spoken words. I heard you, the voice replied, and somehow Elena sensed warmth in it, almost like amusement. This structure is not merely a monument, it is a shipyard, a forge, and an archive of knowledge my creators gathered across their long history, hidden here specifically because the Karn Dominion never thought to search behind a moon orbiting such a young, unremarkable world. They believed nothing worth finding could exist here. They were wrong. The images above the platforms shifted once more, now showing detailed schematics of ships, weapons, and technology, far beyond anything humanity currently possessed. Elena felt her breath catch as she recognized principles of physics her own scientists had only begun to theorize about, laid out here in complete, functional detail. You're saying we can use this, James said slowly. We can build with this technology? You can do more than build, the Keeper said. This structure itself can be activated fully, becoming a shipyard capable of constructing vessels using both the ancient knowledge stored within me and the resources already gathered here across your world's long history, quietly collected in preparation for this very moment. But I must warn you, full activation will alert the Karn Dominion to my presence immediately. They will not allow this facility to exist. They will attack with everything they have. Elena's mind raced. 17 days remained before the Karn's ultimatum expired. If they activated this structure and it drew immediate attack, would there be time to build anything useful before humanity's fragile new alliance was crushed entirely? How long would it take, she asked, to build something that could actually fight the Karn fleet? With the resources gathered and stored here, across many generations, and with the willing labor of your people, the Keeper said, the first functional vessels could be ready within 12 of your days. But I must be honest with you, even these ships, built from my creator's knowledge, will not guarantee victory. The Karn Dominion has conquered 100 worlds greater than yours. What I offer is not certain salvation. I offer only a fighting chance, where before you had none. Wei Lin stepped forward, his voice firm despite the tremor Elena could hear beneath it. A fighting chance is more than we had yesterday. James nodded in agreement. We didn't come all this way to walk back out empty-handed. Elena looked between her two companions, then up at the glowing pillar that held the last consciousness of a civilization that had died, so that a young species on a small blue world might one day have a chance to live free. She thought of the gray skies over Earth, of the frightened families huddled in cold homes, of General Reyes and the impossible weight he carried, of every person on the planet who had no idea that 3 humans stood right now in a chamber that might decide the fate of their entire species. Activate it, she said. Do whatever you need to do. We'll find a way to buy the time you need. The Keeper's voice seemed to grow slightly warmer, if such a thing were possible for an ancient machine intelligence. Then let it begin. And let it be known, small ones, that my creators did not choose your world by accident. They saw something in your kind, even in your early history, a stubbornness, a refusal to accept defeat, that reminded them of themselves before they fell. Do not waste the gift they left you. A deep vibration rolled through the chamber, growing steadily stronger, and the blue light throughout the entire structure surged brighter, spreading outward through the crater and up through the lunar surface itself. Elena watched through a narrow window that had not been visible before, now revealing the crater outside, where the towering spires of the structure were beginning to glow, with a light so bright, it turned the black lunar sky an eerie shade of blue. "Command, this is Lighthouse 1, Elena said urgently, her communication suddenly restored now that the structure had fully powered up. "Do you copy? We have made contact. We have activated the facility." "Repeat, we have activated the facility, and we need everyone back on Earth ready to move, because in a few minutes, the entire Karn fleet is going to know exactly where we are." Far below on Earth, in the underground command center, General Reyes shot up from his chair, as Elena's voice crackled through the speakers, relief and fear crashing through him in equal measure. Around the world, on every continent, scientists and soldiers who had spent weeks waiting for a sign of hope suddenly found themselves scrambling into action, because the message was clear: humanity had found a weapon, and the countdown to war had just begun in earnest. Above the moon's far side, sensors aboard the distant Karn command ship detected the sudden, massive energy surge, and within the cold, dark halls of that alien vessel, an alarm began to sound for the first time since their arrival at this small, unremarkable world they had believed to be completely defenseless. Aboard the Karn command ship, hidden within the massive structure blocking Earth's sun, High Overseer Threx stared at the sudden spike of energy readings coming from the small moon of the planet his forces had come to claim. For a being who had overseen the conquest of over 100 worlds, surprise was a rare feeling. He felt it now, cold and sharp, as his sensors struggled to explain a power signature that matched nothing in the Dominion's vast archive of known technologies. "Report," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority through the command chamber. "Overseer, the energy source is coming from the far side of the small moon," said his sensor officer, a Karn soldier named Vesk, whose antennae twitched nervously as he studied the readings. It was undetectable until moments ago. The signature is ancient. Similar to technology we encountered when we conquered the Elari system. 300 cycles passed. Threx's eyes narrowed. The Elari had been one of the few species to put up a genuine fight before their eventual defeat. A species whose remaining survivors had vanished without explanation, before the Dominion could complete their conquest. If this energy signature matched Elari technology, it meant one thing. The Elari had not simply disappeared. They had come here, to this small, unremarkable world, and left something behind. "Send a strike force," Threx ordered. "I want that structure destroyed before it becomes a problem." Back inside the ancient structure on the far side of the moon, Elena, James, and Wei Lin felt the vibrations grow stronger as the Keeper's systems continued their activation sequence. The Keeper's voice returned to their minds, calm, despite the urgency of the moment. "The Karn Dominion has detected us. Ships are launching from their main vessel. You have approximately 40 minutes before they arrive." 40 minutes to do what? James asked. "Build an army?" "No," the Keeper replied. 40 minutes to activate the primary defense system, which will protect this facility long enough to begin production. I require your assistance to complete the activation manually, as the process was designed for multiple operators working together. Lights along the chamber floor illuminated a path toward 3 of the platform seats surrounding the central pillar. The Keeper explained, in its calm and patient way, that each of them would need to sit at one of the stations and follow a sequence of instructions that would appear before them, guiding the ancient systems back to full function. "This isn't exactly what I trained for," Wei Lin muttered, settling into one of the strange seats, which adjusted itself around his body with a soft hum. "None of us trained for any of this," Elena said, taking her own seat. "Let's just do our best." The instructions appeared before them as shifting patterns of light, and though the symbols were unfamiliar, the Keeper guided their minds gently, translating the ancient process into something their human brains could understand and execute. Elena felt a strange connection form, as if her thoughts were being read and gently directed, not forced, but guided, like a teacher helping a student find the right answer. Meanwhile, on Earth, General Reyes had already set the entire planet's remaining defenses into motion. Every nation, with any spacefaring capability, was ordered to prepare their assets, however limited, for what was coming. Fighter jets, equipped with experimental energy weapons, developed in secret over the past 2 weeks, were readied on the tarmac. What few missile defense satellites remained functional were repositioned toward the moon. "We can't hold off a full Karn strike force with what we have," Marcus told the International Defense Council during an emergency session. "But if that structure needs time to activate, then buying time is exactly what we're going to do." A daring plan formed quickly, born from desperation, and the accumulated military talent of every nation on Earth, working together for the first time in human history. A combined fleet of experimental spacecraft, patched together from secret programs across a dozen countries, would launch toward the moon, not to fight the main Karn fleet directly, which would have been suicide, but to intercept and delay the smaller strike force heading toward the ancient structure. "It's not much," admitted Captain Sarah Chen, reviewing the assembled fleet roster. 18 ships, experimental weapons, unproven in real combat, against a strike force of Karn warships. "It doesn't need to be much," Marcus said. "It just needs to buy Elena and her team enough time." The human fleet launched within the hour, streaking away from Earth's atmosphere on trails of fire, heading toward a battle that many of the pilots privately believed they would not survive. But not one of them hesitated. They had seen the gray skies, felt the cold settling over their homes, and understood exactly what waiting on the ground would mean for their families if this mission failed. Back on the moon, the activation sequence continued. Elena watched as her thoughts, guided by the Keeper, seemed to flow directly into the ancient systems, awakening circuits and mechanisms that had lain dormant for longer than human civilization had existed. The chamber around them pulsed with increasing light, and beyond the walls, the towering spires of the structure began to shift, rearranging themselves into new configurations, forming what looked, through the narrow viewport, like the beginnings of massive defensive cannons rising from the crater floor. 30 minutes, the Keeper announced. "The Karn strike force is entering lunar orbit." "How's the defense system coming along?" James asked, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air of the chamber. "Primary systems are at 60% capacity," the Keeper replied. "It will not be enough to defeat the incoming force, but it should be sufficient to delay them significantly, particularly if your own forces are able to divide their attention." As if summoned by the Keeper's words, a new voice crackled through Elena's suit radio, now reconnected to Earth's communication networks through relays the Keeper had somehow restored. "Lighthouse 1, this is Falcon Squadron," came the voice of the lead pilot, a South African woman named Captain Nomvula Dube. "We are inbound to your position. ETA 15 minutes. We're going to try to slow these things down for you. Just get that thing working." Elena felt tears sting her eyes, though she quickly blinked them away, focusing back on the flowing patterns of light, guiding her hands across the ancient controls. Somewhere above the moon, ordinary human pilots, flying machines built in desperate secrecy, were preparing to face an alien war fleet head-on, buying time with their own lives for a stranger's chance at survival. The battle that followed would later be remembered in human history as the Battle of Shackleton Crater, named for the lunar landmark nearest to where the ancient structure stood. 18 human ships, armed with weapons barely tested outside laboratory conditions, met a Karn strike force of 30 warships in the black void above the moon's surface. The Karn ships were faster, better armored, and carried weapons refined over centuries of conquest, but the human pilots had something the Karn had not expected: absolute desperation and an intimate knowledge of unconventional tactics born from decades of asymmetric warfare on their home planet. Captain Dube led her squadron in tight, unpredictable maneuvers, using the moon's own gravity and terrain to shield their approach, striking at Karn ships from angles their targeting systems struggled to predict. "Splash 1, came a shout over the comm channel, as a Karn fighter exploded in a silent flash of light, destroyed by a well-placed energy burst from an American pilot's experimental weapon system. But the cost was high. Within the first 10 minutes of the battle, 5 human ships had been destroyed, their pilots gone in an instant, sacrificed to buy precious seconds for the activation continuing below on the lunar surface. 20 minutes, the Keeper announced inside the chamber. Defense systems at 80%. The battle above is having the desired effect. Karn forces are being delayed. Elena gritted her teeth, pouring every ounce of concentration into the guided activation sequence. aware that every second mattered, that real people were dying above her to give this ancient machine the time it needed. She thought of Captain Doob's steady voice, of the desperate courage of pilots she had never met, risking everything for a plan built on nothing but hope and old alien writing on a wall. 10 minutes, the keeper said. Defense systems at 95%, nearly complete. Above the lunar surface, the battle raged on, human ships weaving and striking with a fury that surprised even the Karn commanders monitoring the engagement from their command ship. Overseer Threx watched the reports with growing frustration, unable to understand how such primitive vessels were managing to inflict genuine losses on his forces. "Send the remaining reserve fighters," he ordered coldly. "Destroy that structure immediately. I want no further delays." As additional Karn ships surged toward the crater, Elena felt the final sequence of light patterns complete beneath her hands. The chamber shook with a tremendous surge of power, and outside, the towering spires of the ancient structure blazed to full brightness, the defensive cannons rising from the crater floor, finally reaching full operational capacity. "Activation complete," the keeper announced, and there was something almost triumphant in its ancient voice. "Primary defenses online. Beginning automated response to hostile forces." Beams of blue-white energy erupted from the crater floor, streaking upward into the black lunar sky, striking Karn warships with devastating precision. Overseer Threx watched in shock as 3 of his vessels were destroyed within seconds, the ancient defense grid proving far more capable than anything his sensors had predicted. Inside the chamber, Elena, James, and Wei Lin watched through the viewport as the tide of battle above them began, for the first time since the crisis began, to turn in humanity's favor. The ancient defense grid tore through the remaining Karn strike force with a speed and precision that left even the surviving human pilots stunned. Captain Nomvala Doob watched from her cockpit as beams of blue-white light rose from the lunar surface and cut through enemy warships one after another. The crater below transformed into a fortress bristling with weapons far beyond anything the Karn Dominion had ever encountered in 100 conquered worlds. "Command, this is Falcon Squadron," Doob said, breathless with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "The structure is fighting back. I repeat, the structure is fighting back, and it's winning." Within minutes, what remained of the Karn strike force retreated in disarray, fleeing back toward the massive sun-blocking structure, where Overseer Threx watched the disaster unfold with growing fury. Of the 30 warships sent to destroy the ancient facility, only 9 returned. Of the 18 human ships, 13 remained, their pilots exhausted but alive, having accomplished something no one had thought possible only hours earlier. Inside the chamber on the moon's surface, Elena slumped back in her seat, the adrenaline of the past hour finally draining from her body, leaving her hands shaking. James let out a long breath he seemed to have been holding for the entire battle, while Wei Lin simply stared at the viewport, watching the last of the retreating Karn ships vanish into the darkness. "We did it," Wei Lin said quietly, as if he could not quite believe his own words. "We actually did it. The defense grid is now fully operational," the keeper announced, its calm voice a strange contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded above them. However, this was only the beginning. The Karn Dominion will not accept this defeat easily. Overseer Threx commands significant remaining forces, including the primary sun-blocking structure itself, which contains weapons capable of far greater destruction than what you have just witnessed. Elena straightened in her seat, forcing her exhausted mind to focus. "Then we need to move fast. What's next?" "Production of new vessels can now begin," the keeper said. "Using the materials and knowledge stored within this facility, combined with resources your species can provide, I estimate the first wave of combat-ready ships can be completed within 5 of your days. However, I must warn you that even with these ships, a direct assault on the primary Karn structure carries enormous risk." "What's the alternative?" James asked. "Wait for them to come back and finish the job?" "There may be another option," the keeper said, and for the first time, something like uncertainty entered its voice. "Buried deep within my archives is a weapon my creators developed but never had the chance to use before their fall, a device capable of disrupting the very engines that allow Karn vessels to move between stars. If deployed correctly against their primary structure, it could strand their fleet permanently in this system, cutting them off from reinforcements and leaving them vulnerable to a coordinated strike." Elena felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. Can you build it in time? With full cooperation from your people, yes, the keeper replied. But it will require every resource your species can spare, and it will require courage, because someone must deliver the device directly to the Karn structure, and the Karn will not make that task easy. Back on Earth, General Reyes received Elena's report with a mixture of relief and grim determination. The International Defense Council convened within the hour, and for the first time since the crisis began, the mood in the room was not one of despair, but of fierce, focused purpose. Every nation pledged their remaining resources to the effort: rare materials, manufacturing capacity, and most importantly, volunteers willing to risk everything for the mission ahead. Over the following 5 days, humanity worked with a unity it had never before achieved. Factories that once produced automobiles now produced components for the ancient warships, taking shape within the lunar facility. Engineers from rival nations shared knowledge freely, setting aside decades of secrecy and suspicion in the face of a threat that made old national boundaries feel meaningless. Elena, James, and Wei Lin remained on the moon throughout, working alongside a growing team of scientists and engineers, ferried up from Earth in a constant stream of supply ships, protected by Captain Doob's now legendary Falcon Squadron. The ships that emerged from the ancient shipyard were unlike anything humanity had built before, blending the advanced knowledge of the Keeper's long-dead creators with modern human engineering, and, in some cases, simple human ingenuity, that even the Keeper found impressive. 20 vessels were completed within the 5-day deadline, faster than the Keeper had believed possible, a testament to what human determination could accomplish when given a fighting chance. The device the Keeper had spoken of, a compact sphere of dark crystal humming with barely contained energy, was completed on the final day. It would need to be placed directly against the hull of the primary Karn structure, as close to its central power core as possible, in order to disrupt the ancient technology holding the massive shield in place. Someone has to fly it in, Wei Lin said during the final briefing, held in the chamber beneath the Keeper's watchful presence. Someone has to get close enough to place it manually. The automated systems can't guarantee the precision needed. I'll do it, Elena said before she had even fully decided to volunteer, the words simply rising from somewhere deep within her. Elena, you don't have to, James started. I do actually, she said, meeting his eyes steadily. I'm the one who found the signal. I'm the one who understands the Keeper's systems best. If anyone can make sure this device is placed correctly, it's me. Besides, I didn't come this far to sit back now. James was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. Then I'm flying you there myself, no arguments. The attack was launched 3 days later, timed to coincide with a coordinated strike by the newly built human Keeper fleet against Karn forces stationed around Earth. 20 ancient technology warships, crewed by volunteers from every corner of the globe, launched from the lunar shipyard alongside Earth's remaining conventional forces, aiming to draw the attention of the massive Karn fleet away from the primary structure, while a single small craft, piloted by James with Elena aboard, slipped through the chaos toward their true target. The battle that followed would come to be known across human history simply as the Day of Fire, a desperate, chaotic clash fought in the space between Earth and its stolen sun. Human ships, both ancient and modern, struck at Karn vessels with a coordinated fury that stunned Overseer Threx, who had never imagined this young, primitive species capable of such resistance. Focus all remaining forces on the enemy fleet, Threx roared from his command chamber, unaware that the true threat was already slipping past his outer defenses, disguised among the debris and chaos of the larger battle. James guided their small craft with the same steady skill that had brought them safely to the moon weeks earlier, weaving between explosions and defensive fire, until the massive hull of the primary Karn structure loomed before them, vast and dark, blotting out what remained of the sun's light entirely. There, Elena said, pointing to a section of the hull where her sensors detected the telltale signature of the structure's central power core, buried deep beneath layers of alien armor. That's our target. James brought the craft in close enough that Elena, in a full spacesuit, was able to exit through an emergency airlock and make her way across the structure's surface using magnetic boots, the device clutched carefully against her chest. It was the most terrifying walk of her life, alone on the surface of an alien construction the size of a planet, enemy fire lighting up the darkness around her in silent, deadly flashes. She reached the marked location with trembling hands, activated the device as the Keeper had instructed, and watched as it fused itself to the hull, dark crystals spreading tendrils of energy across the surrounding metal, like frost crawling across glass. "It's set," she shouted into her radio, already scrambling back toward James's waiting craft. "Get us out of here. Now." James did not need to be told twice. The small craft peeled away from the massive structure, just as the device reached full activation, and a wave of dark energy rippled outward across the entire surface of the Karn's sun-blocking structure, disrupting the ancient engines that had held it in place for weeks. Aboard the Karn command ship, Overseer Threx felt the entire structure shudder violently beneath him, alarms blaring throughout every corridor as critical systems failed one by one. "What is happening?" he demanded, but no one could give him an answer, because nothing in the Dominion's long history of conquest had ever encountered a weapon like this. Slowly, impossibly, the massive structure began to drift, its position no longer fixed between Earth and the sun. Sunlight, real and warm, began to spill around its edges for the first time in weeks, striking the Earth below in brilliant golden rays that people across the planet would later describe as the most beautiful sight they had ever seen. With their primary structure crippled and their fleet scattered and battered by the coordinated human assault, the remaining Karn forces made the only choice available to them: retreat. The surviving ships gathered what remained of their strength and fled the system, leaving behind the wounded, drifting shell of what had once been humanity's greatest fear. Earth celebrated as the sun returned fully to the sky 3 days later, its warmth spreading across a planet that had nearly given up hope. Crops that had withered in the cold began to recover. Cities that had huddled in darkness lit up once more, not just with electric lights, but with the simple, profound light of the sun they had almost lost forever. Elena stood once more on the roof of the Geneva Observatory, exactly where she had been standing the day this entire nightmare began, watching the sun set in a normal, beautiful way for the first time in weeks. Beside her stood General Reyes, James, Wei Lin, and Captain Doob, all of them exhausted, all of them forever changed by what they had witnessed and survived. "The Keeper says the Karn will likely return someday," Elena said quietly. "They don't give up easily. This isn't really over." "Maybe not," Marcus said, watching the golden light fade slowly into a normal, peaceful twilight. "But next time, we won't be facing them alone, and we won't be facing them unprepared. We have the Keeper. We have the shipyard. We have each other." James smiled, looking up at the darkening sky where the moon was rising, no longer just a distant, silent companion to Earth, but a fortress, a shipyard, and a symbol of hope for an entire species that had refused to give up even when the sun itself had been taken from them. "Humanity was never really alone," Wei Lin said softly. "We just didn't know it yet." Far above them, hidden on the far side of the moon, the ancient chamber continued its quiet work, the Keeper's consciousness watching over a species it had waited countless generations to finally meet, ready to help them grow strong enough to stand among the stars, not as victims of conquest, but as a civilization capable of writing its own future. And somewhere out in the vast darkness beyond the solar system, the scattered remnants of the Karn Dominion carried word back to their masters of a small, unremarkable world that had proven anything but weak. A world that would not be so easily claimed the next time they dared to return. The sun set gently over Geneva that evening, and for the first time in a very long time, Elena Voss watched it go with nothing but peace in her heart, knowing that tomorrow, it would rise again.